I saw a comment and I shared it with you. You probably would have seen it.
Yes.
The others would have seen it. Let me read the comment because I thought it very interesting and appropriate. And this is somebody commenting. Sorry that I turned aside because I have my cell phone plugged in. It says, "It is really
Yes.
sad when all I hear on the news concerning Ralph Thorne is that joining the DLP would profit the DLP. What about the people?" Now, what I propose to do, Marcy, is to share my thoughts on how the people will benefit, and I would say, and how the DLP would benefit because the people are benefiting. You see, because I hear about resources. Now, I personally would have offered a suggestion to my party on how it can raise funds from the people and members and so on, because as you know, my mantra is power and pooling, but that's not my focus right now. When I reflected on that this morning, because I saw that message, I was still in bed when I was checking my notes, I mean my messages and so on, and I saw that, and I said, the individual is spot on, and I'll tell you why. We know all that transpired over the last two elections, and as a consequence of that, the business of Parliament has been the weaker and the worse for it. There are a number of critical functions outside of the debate and so on. There are issues relating to the management and the monitoring of what happens in the public service that did not get, well, for the time that Reverend Atherley was leader of the opposition, we did have the Public Accounts Committee meeting. So I want to identify at least three things that
Yeah.
will, as a consequence of Mr. Thorne becoming leader of the opposition, that can happen, that will allow the public to answer some of the, at least get answers, or at least see aired some of the concerns that we continue to raise, the issues that the Democratic Labour Party, through its spokespersons, and now labeled shadow cabinet. And I am not into semantics and nomenclature. I think the important thing is a voice. We need to hear a voice speaking on an ongoing and in-depth basis on the issues that face this country, particularly all that we have heard. Now, the Auditor General is required, and I'm looking at because you're talking about the Public Accounts Committee, and you're talking about the role of the Auditor General there. I'm going to read first from the original the Constitution that was in place when the Mayor Motley administration came into office. And at section 113 is one of the last, is one of the last provisions of this. Is after that is chapter 10, which speaks to miscellaneous and interpretation. But according to this, section 113 says, there shall be an Auditor General whose office shall be a public office. The accounts of the Supreme Court, the Senate, the House of Assembly, and all departments and offices of the government, including the offices of Cabinet, the Privy Council, the Judicial and Legal Service Commission, the Public Service Commission, and the Police Service Commission, but excluding the Department of the Auditor General, shall at least once in every year be audited and reported on by the Auditor General, who, with his subordinate staff, shall at all times be entitled to have access to all books, records, returns, and reports to such accounts. The Auditor General shall submit his reports made under subsection 2 to the Speaker, or if the office of Speaker is vacant, or the Speaker is for any reason unable to perform the functions of his office, to the Deputy Speaker, who shall cause them to be laid before the House of Assembly. In the exercise of his functions under the provisions of subsections 2 and 3, the Auditor General shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority. The accounts of the Department of the Auditor General shall be audited and reported on by the Minister responsible for finance, and the provisions of subsection 2 and 3 shall apply in relation to the exercise by that minister of those functions as they apply in relation to audits and reports made by the Auditor General. Nothing in this section shall prevent the performance by the Auditor General of such other functions in relation to the accounts of government, and the accounts of other public authorities and other bodies administering public functions in Barbados as may be prescribed by or under any law for the time being enforced in Barbados. Such function, other functions in relation to the supervision and control of expenditure from public funds in Barbados as may be prescribed. Now, I think there's a change. Since the government changed, there were some amendments to the Constitution. And what you find in this Constitution is with the amendment, before you get to a 102, there's the appointment, etc., of the Auditor General. And it makes reference to how the Auditor General is appointed by the President, by instrument on the public seal, acting on the recommendation of the Administrative General and Professional Service Commission, made after commission has consulted with the Prime Minister. It goes on to talk about when, and then it goes back to these functions. Now, the important thing is, one, the Auditor General has the authority to audit all financial matters, all books of all government agencies, commissions, and so on. The second thing is that in order to do an assessment of this, and Caswell, you can probably help me remember where the Public Accounts Committee gets its authority. The Public Accounts Committee is set up as a committee of Parliament chaired by the leader of the opposition to examine and involve the Auditor General in helping them to look at issues that they consider important. Let me put it another way. The Public Accounts Committee, under the chairmanship of the leader of the opposition, sets the work program for the Auditor General in relation to what they want to examine. And that is important. Right now, in the absence of an audit, a Public Accounts Committee, save for if we didn't have what happened transpired, this administration would continue what would normally have been a 10-year period. As Caswell said, at most it would be 8.5 years, because the first 5-year term was shortened by 1.5 years. So if you went to the maximum, you would have had 8.5 years. Subtract from that 8.5 years the time that he would have served how long? For about 3 years. So in essence, in the absence, let's say that during the first term of this administration, you had the leader of the opposition in the form of Bishop Atherley chairing that committee. Interestingly enough, my recollection of the work of that committee did not focus on what transpired during this administration's 3.5 years. I remember they were looking at things relating to housing and so on. That is subject to correction, but I will go back.
No, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you very much. So
nothing. And Transport Board.
Okay, precise. And those related to prior to 2018, Mayor Motley assumed office as Prime Minister. So basically, up to now, we have not had the Auditor General work with a Public Accounts Committee to examine anything under this administration. Now, you would know that the Auditor General he prepares an Auditor General's report. And in that report, you will see areas that he would flag, areas of concern that he chooses to flag. You would also see perhaps reports of special audits. Now, those special audits would have been commissioned by the Public Accounts Committee, for example. So what do we have here? We have a situation where right now, the Democratic Labour Party can sit on the outside, pick up the Auditor General's report, read it, flag all kinds of issues, or hear rumors of problems in the ministry, but it has no access to information in a way that it can do any serious investigation, and as would be found in the work of the Public Accounts Committee. So the first thing that I see, and remember that Mr. Thorne flagged the issue of the Public Accounts Committee as being a priority for him. So if we want to talk about what is benefiting, I hear about $150,000 and all that is fine. The Democratic Labour Party has survived from 2018 to now. And it has survived. I'm not saying it doesn't need the money, but it cannot be the priority. And I want to say that, because you see, if we get lost in that, the government would like us to be getting down at that level and arguing. That is a given, but that is not And I go back to the question that was posed in the chat that I refer to, what is in it for the people? So the first thing is that the people and the Democratic Labour Party will benefit from the presence of the public of the leader of the opposition and the Public Accounts Committee being able then to be, called and work done. So that's the first thing. So I believe that for us, for example, and I'm going to use something that Mr. Thorne referred to, and we hear all the time. Caswell was talking about consultants. Was it somebody make tea for them? I wasn't sure.
There was someone said that there's coming to the office to get the maid to make tea,
and sit down.
Put them foot by the desk.
Now, the question that we would like to, I certainly would want to see, because I remember a song and dance was made by the Prime Minister in opposition about consultants and so on. I can go and find a list of the people who were consultants under the previous administration. I'm a record keeper and a note taker. I would love, for example, for the Auditor General to be requested, or the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee to request a list of all consultants currently retained by this administration, where they are, what they're supposed to be doing, what they're being paid. And then you look at the agencies and what they were supposed to do, and you can do an evaluation. So that's one thing, because I'm mindful of the time. The second thing, Marcia, and Caswell and Kimar and listeners, is the issue that is very imminent. That is the issue of the estimates and a budget, if there's one, coming from that. Because at the end of the day, the government is going to present its plans for expenditures in the estimates. They will say, well, and monies to be received and so on. They're going to present that and say, well, this is the kind of money we have to spend. This is the kind of revenue that we are going to be receiving. And then the budget, in the traditional sense, however it's configured. And I know that I've heard different prime ministers talk about different approaches. But at the end of the day, it's an exercise or two exercises which basically say to the public, this is the kind of expenditures, these are the kind of revenues, these are the shortfalls. Because in my life, I haven't generally seen governments having surpluses in terms of revenues over expenditures. And then it will tell you how they propose to raise the funds to cover those. We have, for example, what I consider a pending or an imminent debt crisis, because we know that the Prime Minister has been borrowing and so on. Now, when it comes to the estimates and the budget, that exercise that has to take place before the end of March, because the government's financial year comes to an end on March 31st. And if it doesn't have those estimates approved and so on in Parliament, they can't spend a cent, right? And so that is important. An interesting development, which can be taken advantage of now, was when this administration came into office. They introduced a practice of bringing public officers into the well of Parliament. There are a lot of arguments against that, but as I say to people, and I would say this to my colleagues in the Democratic Party, including the ladies ladies who curse me because of what I said on the last time on this show, but Maxine McLean is a woman, I will say this, guided by, and I segue, but I'll come back, guided by the words of my late brother Wendell McLean, who I followed in the Senate. And it was interesting. I will have to ask his wife again. The day that I went into the Senate first time, there was some connection with my brother, and she called me and told me about it. And my brother said on his dying bed to his daughters, he had 4 of them, when they think of your father, there's a man dying, they will think of a man of integrity. My brother left that for me. All right? That is my inheritance from Alfred Wendell Audley McLean. He had my father's first name, Alfred, and then he was Wendell Audley, AWA. That's what I want the people want to know what that's what it was. So that is the credo by which I live. And he got that from my parents. He was the second, I was the 9th of 11 children. But anyhow, so that, for those who want to cuss me, I don't mind, because I feel that I have to speak. and say what is important, because individuals, and this is why I've chosen, Marcia, to go this direction and not to speak about those, because at the end of the day, who is president of the DLP or the chairman of the Barbados their party or whatever, if you look on the other side of the fence, who is political leader, all of those things exist because in the case of the political party that I belong to, like Caswell, I wasn't going to go anywhere else. He'd say he's staying over there, I stay over here, and we have been friends for 40 years. Back to what I'm saying, at the end of the day, whoever or wherever you serve, the focus must be, should be, ought to be, and in my case will always be, on the interests of the people of this country. So at the heart of what we are seeing, and I can see coming from this recent development in Parliament with the crossing of the floor and Mr. Thorne becoming leader of the opposition, he now has a chance to go into Parliament. And when you have those officers, instead of just sitting down and hearing Minister of Tourism ask the Minister of Transport some little airy-fairy thing because they're talking to one another about decisions that they took collectively as a cabinet, you now have an opposition leader who can drill down. And I ask Marcia and all the listeners, and I say to my party, instead of playing monkey games, sit down and come up with a list of issues that you want the leader of opposition to raise. The estimates are addressed in the Senate, and there's a way in which, and I certainly will offer my assistance. As I said, this is about the fourth time I've said it publicly to all of them, because I sat as
wow.
leader.
I love that, Miss McLean. I love that. I'm sorry because of there's a break there. I didn't realize you were speaking, but I love what you just said there, Mr. Franklin. I love that. To all of us on, it's about 1,142 of us on. Did you all hear what Miss McLean said? If you didn't hear anything for the whole show, hear what Miss McLean said. Come up with a list of issues that we would like the opposition, the leader of opposition, because he said out of his mouth, he's not there to represent any party. I remember him saying that it is to represent the people. And so we should come up with the issues. That's more where I am at, to be honest with you. Because he's going to make up his mind, Mr. Franklin and Kimar, where he wants to, he might have looked at Mr. Reverend Atherley and realized, you know what? Nobody supported him, not even the church. He was a reverend and not even the church supported him. The church went and voted BLP anyway. So he probably figured, if I'm really going to help Barbados, I have to be part of a party. And he made a decision. That's his decision. The point, though, is that he's a leader of the opposition, and he should be representing all of us. And so come up with a list of issues. Did you hear that? I love these kind of things. So I'm going to put a list together. But I cut you off there, Miss McLean, and then let's jump into Timar or Mr. Franklin to give some comment. But finish what you were saying, if you can remember.
Yeah, and that's the point I was making, because at the end of the day, he will have to sit down. We have seen, for example, all kinds of reports. We've had issues in education. We've had issues in housing. We continue to have issues in health, and we can go through the whole list. In agriculture, there's some developments that I plan to tackle at some point in time. But I'm saying, basically, look and see what are the things that have been concerning us, whether it's, and the performance and so on, and do that. And the last point I want to make, because I said there were three things, was the whole question of the scrutinizing of the government's legislative agenda to come. Because at the end of the day, he will go into Parliament week after week, once House is meeting and his colleagues once the Senate is meeting, to speak to legislation. Now, traditionally, government has, but for most of the legislation, you have some kind of notice. We have seen, of course, and particularly, and this may be particularly important given what I'm going to say about what we've been seeing in recent times, that legislation comes in literally overnight or sometimes the same day, as Caswell could attest to when he was in the Senate. You sometimes are seeing it for the first time. As I said before, because I am a retiree and I am flexible. There are a lot of things I do, but I can tell you that on any given day or at the beginning of a week, I will sit down and I will recommend this. We now have in the Democratic Labour Party a shadow cabinet. I trust that they will do what is required, and if they understand the recommendations that I'm just making, and the connection between the benefits that we know, I'm speaking as a member of the Democratic Labour Party, we can benefit from the relationship and the return of Mr. Thorne, that we can make sure that the issues that are burning, that we talk about, we can now assist him in putting some laser-like attention to them in the House of Assembly and in the Senate. So for me, those are the benefits that I see. All the other things are what I would call, I don't want to say pedestrian, but those are things that whether they happen or not, the party will function, because the money will enhance what is happening now. But I believe in self-help. But my position is that we as a people, and the party to which I belong, maybe Marcy is a male thing, I don't know, because we don't have testosterone in like the fellas do. So, but the men seem to have.
Some of them ain't got it. Some of them ain't got it neither.
So I just think that there's a way of behaving. I always, and I'll say this, I think women bring, and management is my thing. So I look at theories and practices of management, and people have studied how women as a group generally bring to their professional and work situations some of the characteristics that they and the things that they do at the domestic level. And so I think that women tend to be more accommodating. When it is I was gonna make a comment here, but I don't know if it would be appropriate for the thing. I was gonna say, men always get into these same competitions, and I'm sorry, but apologies to anybody who had a problem with that. But I am old enough to say a lot of things that are not necessarily politically correct. But in all seriousness, set aside your personal agendas. In fact, and I would end with this, and this is my word, because they cuss me, so they can cuss me someone. This is my word to Dr. Ronnie Yearwood as president of the DLP. You came into a party of which you were not a part at the top. You were received, and you should understand what it is to start at the top in a place that is unknown to you. So far, whatever you've accomplished, you didn't do it by yourself, even if I would hate to think that you would have thought so. You cannot continue to grow. Now you're talking part now politically, ignoring advice, criticism. Some of it may be brutally hard and whatever, but as somebody who's been on this air for nearly 68 years old, for years, I can tell you I have faced criticism. I took it in my stride. I take it in my stride, but I accept it in good faith. What I just outlined as benefits to the people of Barbados should be benefits to all of us. Stick a pen, take a moment to reflect on what is your purpose in politics, and this is to all of them, and Mr. Thorne too. What is your purpose? What are you intending to do? What do you want to achieve? And I trust that the answer about that, anything to do with your personal accomplishments, should be at the bottom of the list. We're talking about Barbados here. This country is on the brink. We have heard all kinds of things. We are on the brink. We have been seeing money spent, wasted. We've gone through all kinds of things here, whether it's in the hotel sector, whether it's in housing. We are hearing some proposals for education which do not sit well in terms of the potential for failure and all kinds of things. Let us focus on Barbados. And for me, and the last thing I would say, I am one of a 4-generation family. So when I talk, I going so as I am near the departure gate yet, I trust, but that is the Lord's decision, not mine. And whenever it comes, it's not too early. That is when it is. But at the end of the day, let us think about the future of the children born and yet to be born in this country. And so whoever wants to cuss when you share your thinking because you care, let them do that. All I say to people, just do not get involved in wickedness and so on, attacking people. Share your criticism, share your thoughts. And the people who, you see, when people keep, and this is the problem with politics, when people keep saying yes, 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 all hell breaks loose and everything goes wrong. Marcia, I hope, Kimar as well, I hope that what I've said and to the person who shared that comment, I don't know if he or she is different, I can't remember if it's male or female. I hope that that helps you to understand that there is a significant role for the leader opposition to play and a number of benefits that can be realized.